What's up everyone and welcome back to Reload Reacts episode 58. My name is Trey and today we are going to look through r/ProRevenge, the subreddit for those who get back at the ones who wrong them and are usually quite good at doing it. This first post is via Fiberine. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord and it was glorious. Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 a week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stink drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a very nice old lady, who was extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved up enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her and so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away before anything was put in writing. Aw, that's so sad. Enter the new owners. The lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting and making plans. Finally, probate was settled and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days there would be an open house and with the way the market was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently and rents had gone up a lot whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It was pure greed and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered, we moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture, and borrowed ornaments, and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt a lot smaller. Smell. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors because it smelt like all the neighbourhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 2 dozen rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Neighbourhood. We obtained a mouldy old couch and dumped in front yard of the neighbour, across the road, with permission of course. Neighbourhood 2. We started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and seepy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. Neighbourhood times 3. We called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbour set up a barbecue in their front yard and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length of time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told every couple of weeks or so. They have an after party morning, and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The party goer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and sneaking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they planned, but not as much as the greedy people wanted. My friends signed the paper and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. For all the people who were saying they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady passed, average rent for a house that size had only gone up by about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 a week. Yeah, I thought $400 was pretty low, but $800 makes a lot more sense, so I can understand that. Oh wow, I thought there are a couple clues here that this might have been an Australian story. Top comment says, out of vague curiosity, where did this happen? And OP said Sydney, Australia. I totally understand. Like, the pricing sounded right, and so I thought it must be somewhat close. Not the same state, but it is Australia, so we're getting there. This next post is by Triple Z Top. If you're going to steal the catalytics off my truck, you should have checked if they were actually functional first. Wasn't so funny when it was turned. Interesting title. Was a fun morning the beginning of last week, starting at my truck and waking everyone up at 2:45 AM to learn someone swiped the hollowed out cats. The idiots missed the neighbours' cameras that basically gave away who they were. It's 2 kids from the area who drive around in a pretty busted up police Crown Vic. I chose not to call the cops. Instead, I called one of my friends, who's code enforcement, and let him know what my plan was, and he relayed the info to the police that I was finally going to do a nuisance tow on that same Crown Vic. The car they drive isn't street legal as it has no license plates or insurance or working taillights, and rattles like ass due to the trash sound system. They also spend their whole day at a chicken shack smoking. Not sure who they're getting money from, but I'm guessing stealing catalytics was part of the equation. When I spotted the car sitting on a quiet street, I called it in and got the go-ahead to tow. I took it straight to the police station and they tried to run an owner check with the VIN number, only to find out it hasn't been registered since 2011 and the owner was someone other than the kids who sold them the car with no title because of all the back registration owed. The cops said we can go ahead and take it to the junkyard till they can get a black title, aka certificate of destruction. By then, the 2 idiots were running around all over town looking for their car, thinking it got stolen by one of their friends as a prank. The key lock was so worn out, you could start it with any car key. They found it at the junkyard and tried to steal it by one of them distracting the owner and the other stealing their car, but the junkyard was aware of who they were, so they cut the drive shaft off beforehand. I missed out on this part, but they got arrested for trying to steal their car back, and they watched as the junkyard used a crane to rip their car to shreds. When I saw it, the remains looked like a toddler just ripped it to the bare frame out of curiosity. They've been out of jail since, but they haven't left their trailer. I did a drive-by earlier and noticed a Beta Jeep Liberty in their driveway, also with no plates, and already working with the cops on taking that too. If I see it out in a public, except I won't miss the show next time. This next post is by Seagull Fan Club, tricking my slacker co-worker into sabotaging himself. I work in an office with a guy I'll call Seth. Seth is that co-worker everyone knows, lazy, always passing on his work to someone else, and somehow always getting away with it. He'll sit around on his phone or go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He's the kind of guy who will show up late, make some lame excuse about traffic, and then disappear for lunch for 2 hours. For the past 6 months, Seth's favourite target has been me. He'll send emails asking if I can help out with a project, but what he really means is, do all the work while I take the credit. I complained to my boss a couple of times, but somehow Seth has always managed to weasel his way out of trouble. The final straw came when he passed off a major report that was due to a client in 2 days, dumping it on me last minute. One day, I casually asked him if he was good with Excel, and he admitted he didn't know much about it. Perfect. The next time Seth tried to dump a bunch of spreadsheets on me to organise for his next report, I agreed, but this time, I embedded a series of hidden formulas into the document. These formulas didn't do anything important, just enough to mess with the numbers if someone didn't know how to check for hidden cells. It took me a little time, but I was careful not to make it too obvious. The kicker? Every time Seth tried to copy and paste the data into his report, it would scramble everything just enough to be completely useless. On the day the report was due, Seth slacked off like usual, assuming I had handled it like always. When the client called, furious because the report was filled with nonsense numbers, Seth panicked. He rushed to fix it, but every time he tried to fix one part of the report, something else would break. He came to me frantic and asked for help. I acted confused and said, "Oh, I don't know what happened, maybe it's a glitch?" I gave him some vague advice and watched as he spent the entire day trying to salvage his mess. Our boss found out, and for once, Seth couldn't talk his way out of it. He got lambasted for screwing up such an important project and was put on temporary leave without pay. I guess he'll be doing his own work from now on. Top comment says, "Perhaps every time you're asked, shoot your manager an email saying that you're happy to help, but you're asking the manager what other projects he or she wants you to delay to work on your next co-worker's project." This next post is by The Music Fella. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Congrats. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years, so I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalised at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later and I didn't bother answering, but through my window I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already, I wasn't digging the neighbourhood, but I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbour's water pump going. Now this neighbour, an old guy, lived in a 3-storey house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. The guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He wasn't super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Fair enough. Now I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited until his pump turned off and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious because if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years. This house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to just be caused by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find exactly where he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, wondering if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now water in my country is very cheap, My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden, only cost like $5 a month, even with the neighbour also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. So what I did was really simple. I just turned off the water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which automatically, electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. Smart. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring written all over it. At around 3 AM, I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighbourhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So, the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalise the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalised, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now the landlord, lost both tenants, has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring and burnt out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water. And I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day, until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Yeah, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue, and a neighbour who could potentially be a pain in the A, by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds 1 stone, I'd say. Top comment says, "Well played, especially managing to keep a straight face when he asked you about turning the water off." Yeah, it should have been really suspicious that he asked about the water in the first place. Because that's weird to go over to your neighbour's house and say, "Hey, did you turn your water off?" Like, you don't ask that. That's a weird thing to ask. So your neighbour asking that, even if you didn't know, should be really suspicious. This next post is by ScaredyCat1122. My ex-mother-in-law sent her church friends to harass my daughters and I. I have now exposed her family to her church community, and she's getting shamed and shunned at church. Oof, that's a tough read. My 46F daughters, 17 and 15, have a strained relationship with my ex-husband's parents, 78M and 80F. My ex passed away in an accident last year and we've had some major family drama since due to his cheating and him leaving 2 boys born with his affair partner orphaned. She also passed. Part of the drama has been my ex-in-laws trying to get custody of my daughters and them also trying to live with us. First one we're going to go over, second one will never happen. Where we live, there's a weekend market with fresh produce, eggs, meats, and other products straight from farmers. This week was extra special, since it was my youngest's birthday. Yay, happy birthday. Since her party is later in the month, I decided to give her a budget and set her loose on the market to get whatever she wanted, mostly chocolate and sweets. After an hour, I did start getting worried, and just before I called her, she called me. She was crying, saying some weird people have cornered her. I ran to her with my oldest daughter to find 6 older women berating my daughter for being unchristian, for refusing to spend time with her paternal grandparents, or for wanting to be a good big sister to her poor orphan baby brothers. My daughters are the ones that found out about my ex cheating and the babies, so they aren't fond of the kids. It's trauma and they are working with a therapist. Fair enough. I got between the group and my daughter, telling my eldest to go pay the stuff her sister had and to go to the car. Then I turned to the women, some who I knew from when we went to my ex-in-law's church, and ripped them a new one. They told me I was worst for refusing to obey my ex-in-laws like a good Christian wife. Barf. Eventually the screaming turned too loud and we were all asked to leave the market. I met with my girls in the car, the women following me like a group of vultures. I managed to get in my car and drove away. After my girls went to bed, I got online to talk to another member of the church that I'm in good terms with. I told him about what happened and after he apologized he told me what was going on. My ex-mother-in-law posted this massive story in the church's Facebook group about how horrible my daughters and I are, how we are leaving them homeless and penniless, they inherited my ex's personal bank account and his life insurance, and how my daughters don't even talk to them. She has also accused us of being the reason she lost her grandsons. The boys are now living with distant relatives of my ex-husband. Basically, it was a sob story worthy of a Hallmark movie, and of course, they were getting all the love and support from the more extremist members of their church. This church and its members are a bit annoying, especially with LGBTQ+ topics. But they have a small saving grace. They are incredibly strict about cheating. It's a big no-no, be it from a wife or a husband equally. Now, how did she get around blaming me about affair children without exposing the cheating? She claimed the other woman was our surrogate, since I was unable to have more children, then said I didn't want the babies because they were boys, which is absolutely disgusting to be accused of. Yeah, well, I decided it was time to clean up this mess, and since I was mid-divorce when my ex passed, I had all the evidence needed, and since the divorce wasn't completed, I don't have any legal ramification for releasing all the evidence. I was off the next day, and went to a print shop to get copies of all the delightful pictures of my ex cheating, his text conversations with his affair partner, the ones with his parents confessing to his cheating and getting support from them, my ex-in-laws harassing me about the divorce, and all the emails and text messages of them bullying my daughters about their baby brothers. In one of them they call my daughters some mean names and telling them it was their fault their father passed since they told me about the affair and I began the divorce. This one was literally 2 days after my ex passed. I paid extra for all of this to be printed in beautiful high quality paper. Then when I got home, I sat down for hours to make delightfully personalised binders. They look like the little prayer song packets the church give for everyone to take to sing hymns. The first picture when opening the binders is my ex and his side woman making out in our living room. Their faces are easy to discern, and the girl looks nothing like me, different skin tones and hair colour. Underneath I wrote ex-husband's name and affair girl's name love story. I took them to the church before service. There's a desk in the back with the songbooks for people that need/forget their own and they never check them. The gossip mill was quick and harsh. The names my ex and his affair partner got called in the Facebook were so bad the pastor himself had to get involved just to keep things relatively PG-13. People were angry at my ex-in-laws for their abuse to my daughters. But what made me laugh was that I was still in the wrong for the divorce, but it is understandable that I failed on my duties after the shock, and I possibly will one day return to the light, unlike my cheating husband and his Jezebel. They use another word I can't use here, I imagine. I got 2 apology letters in the mail for my girl, and an invitation to join the church for support, quote unquote. As for my ex-in-laws, they got shamed into leaving the church. My ex-mother-in-law made a post on her wall about how alienated she feels, and how no one cares for the elderly anymore, how she wished her great son was still alive, since he would have taken care of her and her husband. With what money, I don't know, since I was the breadwinner. Explanation on the will. My ex-husband had a will that named his parents as beneficiaries. As far as I was aware, he had told me he named our daughters, not them. I never pushed for me to be the beneficiary, as my own will has my daughters as the beneficiaries, not him. This next post is by Axel Raffin. Client tried to screw me by locking me out of my own system. I'll read this top part first. Since so many people assume this happened in the States, I just want to say that I'm from a small country in Europe. The laws and regulations here are different than in the States. We have a government agency here that has everything to do with registering companies, and they do keep track of who's who. If you are a serial startup guy who leaves nothing but burnt ashes behind you, you can't really do it here. You have to register the owner and members of the board of the company if there is one. If you have prior history of failed companies, or you've broken the law in some regard, you are blacklisted at that establishment. Okay, now on to the actual story. I've worked as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 20 years, doing all manner of things from creating simple HTML websites to managing a big hotel's complete IT infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in the day I was coding biggish custom websites for was a rental company. Now, I had heard lots of warnings about not working with this guy that owned it. He had a reputation that he was as sharp as a tack, backstabbing and conniving. He was a lawyer after all, so I went into the partnership with that in mind. He wanted a new website for his renting gig, where people would list their home for rent, renters would sign up and pay a subscription to the site, and he would get the whole lot. Nothing out of the ordinary here. So we make a pretty good deal on paper, we sign it, and I get started on the project. Coding everything in PHP goes well, but he demands suddenly that I show him progress only a week into the progress. He wants to see the website front now. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I tried explaining to him that the front-end work isn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming, and that I only had pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly states this. He then gets on his high horse and demands that I put everything on hold to do the front-end first, design, and then program. I, being really young at the time and fairly naive, agreed to this without asking for it to be in the contract, as an addendum to start working on the design now. Now, the contract stated that I was given free reign of the design decisions as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I make a fast draft in Fireworks. This was back when it was a Macromedia product, before the Adobe acquisition. For anyone that doesn't know, Fireworks is basically Illustrator but for web design, and within 2 days I show him. He's not impressed and demands a different direction and sets up a list of demands. I, as always, aim to please the customer and just do what he wants. I design a new layout with his list of demands, but he doesn't like that either. That's how the next 3 months go, a never-ending circle where he is never happy with anything. Now, close to 4 months into the project, he demands to see a working showcase of the backend. I point out that he himself changed the order in how the project was being done and had demanded that I do the front-end design first instead of the back-end as stated in the contract, which he now turns on me and says, yes, The contract we both signed says you will have a working backend to show me at the end of the month. If you don't honour that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism. Okay, I now have 12 days to do a backend for a website. So I get a friend to help me and we work tirelessly through a weekend and I have a good base to work from in 9 days. Mind you, at this point, he has only paid the security on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and has shielded himself from paying by hiding behind, well, if you can't honour the contract, why should I finish XX work and I'll pay as per the contract? Remembering now all the warnings I had heard about this guy, I decided to add a special function to the code just to be safe. More on that later. So now it's the end of the month, we have a front-end design he is okay with, and a back-end that has been finished to about 85% of what is required according to the contract, and still have a month left to finish everything else. Time for show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own development server, and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had about 512 kilobit per second upstream from the server, it might lag a little. But it wouldn't when it would be put on the productional server he has his website on at his hosting company. He says that's okay and the demonstration goes on. As I'm showing him the site, both front end and back end, I can see he's immensely happy with it, although he would never say so out loud. He's trying to hide his smile that pops up regularly and his eyes gleam with all the added ways he can now start making money from. Anyways, he now says that it's way too slow, this is wrong, blah blah blah. I want you to put it up on my prod server and see how the speed is. Okay, no problem, I can make that happen, please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. Okay. I wait a few days and then get an email from him where he includes a forwarded message from the bank detaining a transaction from him to me to the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I push the system to his prod server so he can take a look at it under beta.his-domain.tld. I then send him an email stating that he can try the system with the supplied credentials. What he doesn't know is that I knew he'd been fishing around for another program to do his project to pick up from what a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right, so I knew he would most likely try to screw me. What I also suspected was that the email he sent me with the transaction proof was a fake, which it ended up being. ProRevenge 1, remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was, if his user tried to remove my admin from the system without one setting being changed in the config first, the system would first delete and purge the database and then remove all the documents in the web root. Well, not 5 minutes after he reads the email from me, he does just that. He tries to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. Guess who has nothing of the project left? He does. ProRevenge 2. Since it is considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities, and it goes under investigation by both the police and bank lawyers. I also sold the system to a competitor of his for a better price than originally contracted to him, and last I knew, he was now blacklisted from owning a company as well as he lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got that 5% he paid at the beginning, and for working for just over 5 months on this project, that is hardly anything, but the knowledge of his demise will keep my heart warm for the rest of my life. Well played, OP. Well played. And that's going to be it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stories in r/ProRevenge. Let me know what you'd like to listen to next in the comments section below. And also hit that subscribe button with your left nostril because I post new Reddit content every single day. There are 2 videos on the screen right now, one of which is for the most recent video, and another is for a video the YouTube algorithm thinks you'll want to watch next. My name is Trey, this was Reload Reacts, and I will see you in the next video.